Have you ever seen a baobab tree? With its thick, smooth trunk and branches that look like roots reaching for the sky, it's one of the most unique trees on our planet. They call it the upside-down tree, and there's a fascinating story behind that name, a tale that whispers through the savannas of Africa. Long, long ago, when the world was new and the gods walked the earth, they were busy creating all the plants and animals. They gave each tree a special gift. The tall iroko tree was given strength, its wood so sturdy it could build homes and canoes. The palm tree was blessed with nourishment, offering its sweet dates and refreshing milk. The acacia tree, with its intricate leaves, was granted wisdom, providing shade and shelter for all who rested beneath it. Then there was the baobab. It was given a thick trunk and a humble spirit. But the baobab was not satisfied. It looked around and saw the gifts of the other trees, and its heart filled with envy. It watched the iroko standing so tall and proud, and it complained to the gods. "Why can't I be tall like the iroko? I want to see over the entire savanna." The gods simply smiled and told it to be patient, for it had its own unique role to play. But the baobab didn't listen. A few seasons passed, and it saw the fig tree, heavy with sweet, delicious fruit that fed both people and animals. Again, it cried out to the gods, "This isn't fair. I wish to bear sweet fruit like the fig. I want everyone to flock to me for my bounty." The gods, a little less patient this time, reminded the baobab that its purpose was different, but special in its own way. Its thick trunk could store water, a life-saving gift in the dry season. Still, the baobab grumbled. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the baobab saw the beautiful jacaranda tree burst into a spectacular display of vibrant purple flowers. It was a breathtaking sight. This was the final straw for the envious baobab. It wailed to the heavens, its voice shaking with desire, "Please, make me beautiful like the jacaranda. Let me bloom with glorious flowers so that everyone will admire me." This time, the gods did not smile. Their patience had finally run out. They had given the baobab a vital purpose to be a source of life and water in the harshest of lands, but it could only see what it lacked. It was constantly complaining, never appreciating its own strengths. In a flash of frustration, the gods descended from the sky. They didn't speak a word. Instead, they grabbed the baobab by its trunk, pulled it right out of the ground, and in a powerful motion, plunged it back into the earth. But this time, upside down. Its branches were now buried deep in the soil, and its roots were left exposed, reaching up towards the sky. And that is how the baobab tree remains to this day. When you look at it, it appears as though its roots are growing towards the heavens. It stands as a silent, powerful reminder from the gods, a lesson etched into the very landscape of Africa. For countless years after its punishment, the baobab stood utterly alone. Its massive trunk was a solitary pillar of defiance, and its gnarled, root-like branches stretched awkwardly toward the heavens. It was a strange, upside-down silhouette against the vast African sky. The other trees, the slender acacias and the proud palms, whispered on the wind whenever it stirred their leaves. They called the baobab cursed. No birds dared to build nests among its strange branches. Animals and travelers seeking shade would walk right past it, preferring the company of the more conventional trees. It offered no comfort, no beauty, only a stark, lonely presence. But through all this, the baobab didn't complain. Not anymore. Not a single word of protest or self-pity escaped it. Instead, it learned to listen. It listened to the profound silence of the midday heat, to the gentle patter of the first rains, and to the ancient stories carried on the swirling winds that swept across the savanna. It absorbed everything: the rustle of a passing snake, the distant roar of a lion, the laughter of children from a far-off village. It drank in the world in a way it never had before, when it was consumed by its own desires. It learned patience from the slow crawl of the sun across the sky and resilience from the hardy grasses that always grew back after being trampled. One moonless night, so dark that the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, a powerful presence descended. It was the spirit of the sky, the very one who had punished the baobab so long ago. Curious about the tree's newfound silence, she took the form of a sleek black raven and landed silently on one of its highest branches. Her obsidian eyes gleamed in the faint starlight as she looked down at the great tree. "Why do you not beg anymore?" she asked, her voice like the whisper of the night wind. "For so long, you cried out for beauty and attention. Now, you say nothing." The baobab, for the first time in ages, spoke. Its voice was no longer a whine of complaint, but a deep, rumbling sound, like stones shifting deep within the earth. "I learned it said simply. I stopped looking at myself and started watching the world around me. I saw how the acacia tree offers its thorns to protect the ants that live within it, and in return, the ants defend it from leaf-eating creatures. I watched how the date palm gives its sweet fruit freely, without pride or expectation. I saw that every living thing has a purpose, a gift to offer. I realized I asked for too much. I forgot the most important thing, to give. The sky spirit, in her raven form, blinked her intelligent eyes, processing the tree's profound transformation. And now, she cooed softly, "What do you wish for now, Baobab?" The tree's answer was immediate and heartfelt. "I only ask for one thing," it rumbled. "Let me be useful. Let me give." A powerful energy seemed to shiver through the raven's feathers and down into the very roots of the tree. From that moment on, everything changed. The baobab was transformed, not in its appearance, but in its purpose. Its fibrous bark, once just a rough, ugly skin, became a source of strong rope for the villagers and soft cloth for their clothes. Its large gourd-like fruit, which it had never produced before, was discovered to be packed with vitamins and healing properties, a true superfruit that nourished the people and their livestock. The baobab began to grow even larger, and its massive trunk often became hollow with age. But this wasn't a weakness. It became a strength. The hollow space offered life-saving shelter for wandering travelers during sudden storms and a cool refuge for animals escaping the searing sun. The tree even became a natural reservoir, storing thousands of gallons of precious rainwater in its trunk, a vital source of water during the long dry season. The baobab became a true tree of life. It was not beautiful in the conventional way it had once so desperately desired. Its branches were still strange, its trunk still comically thick, but it was revered, it was respected, it was loved. The whispers on the wind changed from taunts to tales of gratitude. Legends were born not from its beauty, but from its boundless generosity. And in its long-learned silence, the baobab finally found its true, enduring voice. For centuries, the baobab tree was more than just a tree. It was a living memory, a silent witness to time itself. In the scorching dry seasons, weary nomads, their throats parched with dust, would find life-giving water stored deep within its massive trunk. And when the rains finally came, washing the world clean, children would gather around it. Their laughter would echo as they tied ropes to its strong limbs, playing in joyful circles under its protective canopy. The griots, the sacred keepers of stories and history, chose the baobab as their stage. Beneath its crooked, outstretched arms, they wove tales of heroes and spirits, of ancient kings and forgotten times, their voices carrying the weight of generations. The tree wasn't just wood and leaves. It was a library, a theater, a heart for the community. But one year, the skies turned cruel and unforgiving. The life-giving rain simply stopped. The rivers, once flowing with energy, cracked open into dusty, barren scars on the land. Livestock, their ribs showing, fell one by one. The crops, once green and promising, withered into brown stalks. Famine began to whisper its cold promises, and yet, through it all, the baobab stood, resolute, unchanging, desperate. The villagers gathered around its immense base, their faces etched with worry. Old Mommy Sua, her body bent by age and her eyes blind to the world, stepped forward. She reached out a trembling hand and placed it gently on the rough, ancient bark. A hush fell over the crowd as she whispered, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves, "It still lives. It always lives." Driven by a sliver of hope, they carefully carved into its trunk. And then, a miracle, water came forth. It wasn't a flood, just a slow, steady trickle, but it was enough. Enough to drink, enough to wet their cracked lips, enough to keep going. And they did. They survived. One night, with the drought still clinging to the land like a suffocating smoke, a young child looked up at the strange, tangled branches silhouetted against the starry sky. He asked the old griot sitting beneath it, "Why does the baobab never fall? Why is it so different?" The griot, his eyes full of ancient wisdom, looked up at the tangled limbs above, which seemed to reach down from the sky rather than up from the earth. "Because," he said softly, "it was planted upside down. Its roots are in the heavens. It sees the sky and the stars better than we ever could. It learned a long time ago not to crave beauty, but to find its purpose." And in that moment, everyone understood. The baobab, The tree they once called cursed or strange had become sacred. It wasn't just a tree, it was a promise. And so, in that long, dry season of death, it gave life once more, its roots firmly planted in the sky, drawing strength from the universe itself. For centuries, they watched the world turn. The baobab trees, scattered across the savanna, multiplying with each passing generation. Each one seemed to whisper the same ancient secrets, their thick, scarred trunks holding the memories of every hand that ever leaned on them, both literally and spiritually. Entire villages grew up around these gentle giants. Bustling markets bloomed in the cool comfort of their shade. Young lovers, full of hope, would carve their initials into the soft bark, a silent promise to the future. Mothers would hush their crying infants with sweet lullabies sung under the baobab's massive, sheltering arms. These trees stood as silent witnesses to it all: the joy of births, the sorrow of deaths, the sacredness of rituals, and the endless cycle of good times and hard times. They weren't just trees, they were living archives, libraries of human experience. But then, the world began to change, faster than ever before. The old ways started to fade. Concrete replaced clay huts, and steel towers reached for the sky, casting long shadows where the trees once stretched. The baobab stood still, as it always had, but fewer and fewer people came to listen to its ancient wisdom. The whispers of the past were drowned out by the noise of the present. In one particular village, a young girl named Naima held onto the old stories. Every single day, she would visit the last great baobab that stood near her home. She remembered the tales her grandmother had told her, fantastic stories of how the gods cursed the tree to grow upside down, how it saved people from great floods, and how it drank water from the clouds themselves, weeping it back into the thirsty earth for everyone to share. Naima would sit among its enormous roots, which felt like the gnarled knuckles of an old, kind hand, and she would talk to the tree as if it were her oldest friend. She'd tell it about her day, her dreams, her fears. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, she did something different. She pressed her ear flat against the rough, weathered bark. The wind was completely still. The village behind her buzzed with the sounds of modern life, but here, in the cradle of the baobab's roots, she heard it. Something faint, but undeniable. A low, rhythmic hum, a steady pulse, like a slow, deep heartbeat. She heard a story. The world forgets, she whispered to the ancient trunk, her voice full of a sudden, fierce determination. But I won't. And that very night, Naima began to write. She wrote down every story she could remember, every feeling the tree gave her. She wrote tales of gods and mortals, of upside-down roots that gazed at the heavens, and of a time when trees gave people so much more than just shade. The baobab, which had been silenced by the relentless march of time, had found a new voice. Through her, it began to speak once more, its ancient stories flowing from her pen, ready to be discovered by a world that had forgotten how to listen. Years passed, and Naima's stories spread far and wide. They traveled first through her village, whispered from one family to the next, then carried by traders and travelers to distant towns and bustling cities. Her words were like seeds on the wind, taking root in the hearts of modern people and breathing life back into ancient myths. The magic she had rediscovered began to ripple through the culture. Soon, a familiar sight returned to the land. Children once again gathered in the shade of mighty baobab trees, their faces upturned, listening with wide-eyed wonder as elders spoke the old names of the gods. The stories, once faded, were now vibrant and alive. A new generation was learning the language of the earth, the rhythms of the seasons, and the wisdom held within the gnarled bark of the trees. Inspired by Naima's devotion, some villagers even began planting new baobab saplings. With each one they placed in the earth, they whispered prayers into the soil, weaving their hopes and dreams into the roots of the future. It was a promise to remember, a commitment to keep the stories alive for their own children and their children's children. In her final years, when her hair had turned to silver and her hands were worn from a life of purpose, Naima felt a pull to return to where it all began. She journeyed back to the first tree, the oldest baobab, the one that had first spoken to her. It was even more magnificent now, its massive trunk hollowed by the passage of centuries, a living cathedral of wood and leaves. She leaned against its familiar rough bark, just as she had done as a curious young girl so long ago. The same sense of peace and connection washed over her. Her heart, though old, still danced with the vibrant, steady pulse of those ancient voices. She closed her eyes, letting the sun warm her face and the gentle breeze play with her silver hair. And then, for a fleeting moment, the wind carried a sound she knew as well as her own name. It was a voice deep, slow, and rooted in the very earth beneath her feet. You remembered, it rumbled, a sound of profound gratitude and peace. Naima smiled, a soft, knowing expression gracing her lips. Always, she whispered back to the tree, to the wind, to the memories themselves. When Naima eventually passed from the world, the village held a quiet ceremony. It wasn't a time for deep mourning, not in the way one mourns a loss. Instead, it was a celebration of a life that had given so much back to them. They gathered around the great baobab, and as the sun set, they sang the old songs. They told tales, their voices rising and falling in the twilight, tales of how the gods, in a fit of pique, had once cursed the baobab, planting it upside down with its roots reaching for the sky. And yet, they sang, this cursed tree had defied its fate. It became the most giving, the most enduring, the most resilient being in all the land. It offered shade from the scorching sun, water from its trunk in times of drought, and a home for countless creatures. The baobab remained standing, not just as a tree, but as a living monument. It was a monument to memory, a testament to resilience, and a symbol of the profound power of a single story to change the world. Where gods had once shown scorn, people had found an unshakable strength. And so the tree, though forever upside down, stood taller than ever in the hearts of those who had learned, once again, to listen. Lyric Chronicles, where the roots of myth meet the light of memory. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales from the heart of our world.